You're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. These are our headlines from across the continent this evening. Now, the World Bank and IMF have put $57 billion on the table in loans and grants for Africa. But can they do more to relieve pressure on African economies in the context of COVID-19? Now, the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, spoke to France 24. We'll bring you extracts of that interview at the top of the show. The demand for medical gloves is skyrocketing. The rubber industry in Ivory Coast ought to be benefiting from that, but there are some hitches, as our reporters found out. We'll bring you that later on in the show. And disinformation and about how to cure the coronavirus. The France 24 Observer's show has been looking at some of the fake solutions circulating online. Thanks for watching. Now, we'll start this bulletin with efforts to offset an economic crisis in Africa due to the coronavirus pandemic. Emmanuel Macron has called for a moratorium on debt to help African countries dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. The French president's initiative, however, concerns lending more from state treasuries, for example, France and other G20 nations. But what about the IMF and the World Bank? Now, they have offered significant financial assistance packages to many African countries currently in some sort of lockdown. But could they also consider debt relief, for example? Now, that is amongst the topics discussed with the IMF chief, Kristalina Georgieva. She spoke to France 24's Georgia Calvin-Smith. Let's take a listen.
What we would like to do with the World Bank is to take this period of time of debt moratorium and look at countries one by one to assess that sustainability, to understand what more can be done, and also how we can get countries themselves to take charge of their debt situation by providing more information, in other words, going in a direction of full transparency, and be more proactive in making sure that debt is well managed. When it comes down to would there be cases when there may be need for debt forgiveness? As we do these assessments, that would be a conclusion that is expected from us to draw. That's
the head of the IMF there speaking to France 24's Georgia Calvin-Smith, and you can catch the rest of that interview on our website, france24.com. Now, to Senegal next, where authorities have put in place a nighttime curfew. Now, as a result, those forced to beg for a living and homeless children are struggling even more than usual. Many in the country's capital have been directed towards an emergency shelter where some relief can be provided. James Vezina has more.
At the start of the crisis, this charity was handing out food to children living in the streets. But after Senegal implemented a nighttime curfew, sleeping rough in Dakar has become even harder, and children are seeking further help.
So in there's a pot sax dañ koy jël raxas ko ba pare yow yaa koy ñëk raxas ñoom ñu raxas ko def ci microbe ba pare soog laa defal après nga dem.
The organisation has opened its doors to the dozens of children flocking to its shelter in the north of the capital. Many were kicked out by their families or fled the abuse of some religious schools.
Avant, on avait 70 jeunes. 70 jeunes ici au tremplin, au village de Plaine de la Cruz. Mais depuis une semaine, actuellement, ils sont 120.
Newcomers are quarantined for 2 weeks, and nurses take their temperature each morning. Preventive measures that they didn't follow until now.
Parce que ñun duñu kii loolu ñun yenn saa dañuy toog di carte foofu noonu doon mbooloo doon groupe da ngay gis sax benn policier bu romb ñëw di romb rek tas mbooloo bi ne tas leen wala mu ñëw jéem a jàpp booy bëgg leen a yóbbu ak yooyu noonu.
Once the crisis ends, the children will be free to return to the streets or stay on at the refuge, where they can take reading classes and follow courses.
Now, with more than 2 million cases of coronavirus detected globally, demand for personal protective equipment has never been greater. Latex gloves are near the top of the list, and Ivory Coast's rubber producers could potentially capitalise on this spike in demand. But so far, obstacles remain in their way. Sam Bradpeace and Thais Broek sent us this report.
The Ivory Coast is Africa's largest rubber producer, exporting 780 tons in 2019. The vast majority goes to the automobile industry, but with international clients like Michelin and Bridgestone cancelling orders and closing factories, the sector is in trouble. Producers are losing up to 91 million euros in profits every month. Pierre, who is a supervisor at this plantation just outside Abidjan, is worried.
On n'arrive pas à vendre le produit. Voilà, tous les usines sont fermées. Donc on ne sait pas quoi faire. Même si la virus ne nous a pas atteints, à le fait qu'on n'a pas de l'argent pour acheter de nourriture, de quoi pour subvenir les besoins de la famille, bon, on sera tous malades.
At a time when medical professionals across the world are decrying a lack of protective equipment, it is a cruel irony that plantations like this one are struggling. Most glove manufacturing takes place in Southeast Asia, with Malaysia alone dominating 60% of the global market. The Ivory Coast does not have a single glove-making factory, and many see this as a missed opportunity.
Si nous avions une usine de gants ou de capotes à Abidjan, nous aurions pu, au moment où la crise sévissait, nous aurions pu soutenir l'Europe, produire en Afrique pour les besoins de l'Europe. Et je pense qu'au sortir de cette crise, l'environnement devra changer.
The problems currently faced by the Ivorian rubber sector have highlighted some of the wider dysfunctions faced in Africa's trading relationships with much of the rest of the world. It seems like the key to economic development is not the export of raw materials, but instead manufacturing.
Now, there's been a certain amount of misinformation circulating about the COVID-19 virus, including home remedies that can supposedly be helpful. Herman Bocco of the France 24 Observers team has been looking at some supposed solutions that have been shared online around the continent. Let's take a look.
You've probably seen tips on social media for home remedies that supposedly can cure the coronavirus. Here's a video that's been circulating on WhatsApp groups in several African countries.
Pour se soigner, alors, le coronavirus, comme on le dit, la première chose, les ingrédients qu'il faut avoir, c'est d'abord ça, c'est le ginger, que vous connaissez, et il y a l'ail, et il y a le citron.
The man suggests mixing the ingredients, then boiling them up and cooling the liquid down to drink.
Et vous buvez, et c'est tout. Coronavirus terminé.
We showed the video to Professor Khadi Diatou Bafal, former head of infectious diseases at the Dakar Principal Hospital in Senegal.
Cette mixture apportera beaucoup de bienfaits au corps humain parce que c'est beaucoup de vitamines, notamment C, des oligo-éléments et des antioxydants. Mais pour traiter le COVID-19, non.
Professor Fall says very little is known about the virus still, though there are treatments that are being tested. Doctors are unanimous, though, that there is no evidence that ginger, garlic or lemon can cure the virus itself.
Keep recording.
Here's another so-called remedy we've seen a lot, that a home-made steam bath can be effective.
Since the coronavirus is a virus-type thing, viruses can't survive in heat.
Not true, says the professor.
Nous rappelons que c'est une infection à porte d'entrée aérienne, un virus qui endommage les poumons. Donc tout ce qui peut quand même aggraver l'état respiratoire du patient est à éviter. De surcroît, ces aérosols peuvent aggraver la toux, les quintes d'éternuement et continuer à disséminer la maladie.
And finally, this theory.
Coronavirus, pourquoi les gens aiment toujours utiliser les gros mots pour pouvoir faire du mal ou bien affaiblir les autres? Coronavirus, on parle d'une grippe. Quand on parle de grippe, vous comprendrez déjà que la grippe, c'est la grippe.
S'ils ont un peu une similitude, le Covid-19 est différent de la grippe. Il a une durée d'incubation plus longue, il demeure plus longtemps dans l'organisme, presque 20 jours, donc le patient est plus contagieux. Sa mortalité est plus importante, elle est de 3 à 4%, alors que celle de la grippe est à 0,1%. Surtout sur le plan thérapeutique, pas de traitement, pas de vaccin.
There's a lot of bad information going around about the virus. You can follow our fact checks on the debunked section at observers.france24.com.
A South African aerospace company is shifting some of its focus to producing medical supplies. This against the backdrop of the pandemic. And Paramount Group is one of those companies, and a team of emergency doctors there have designed a so-called Intubox. Now, that's a protective piece of equipment that covers the head and chest of patients. The company plans to produce thousands of kits and distribute them to hospitals. Let's take a listen to the Vice President of Paramount Group.
The unit is designed as a means of actually isolating the patient. So the patient essentially would slide into the unit, or the unit would be placed over the patient in their bed, and the patient would then be closed in the unit. And that would essentially prevent the droplets from actually falling onto healthcare workers, or the healthcare workers being exposed to it. It's also redeployable, so we can collapse the unit and move it quite easily around the hospitals, or from one medical facility to another medical facility.
All right, that's all for this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching and good night.